Six world powers and Iran have agreed a breakthrough deal to curb the country's nuclear program in exchange for an end to international economic sanctions. Joining me to discuss this historic agreement is Roula Khalaf, our foreign editor. Roula, it's taken months, it's taken years. Is this the real deal? Is it enforceable?
Well, this has been going on for 12 years, Lionel, as you know. This is when this dispute first started, and months of negotiations. This is a deal that has a lot of potential, and that if there's will on both sides, it can be enforceable. It is, however, a deal that lasts for 10 to 15 years. Iran gets sanctions lifted, and in return curbs its nuclear ambitions substantially.
Right, we'll come to the international sanctions in a minute, but in terms of the curbs, it basically freezes the Iran's program for 10 plus years, maybe up to 15, rolls back exactly what?
Rolls back uranium enrichment to a very limited number of centrifuges and a very limited level of enrichment. It also turns a heavy water reactor into a light water reactor, so that addresses the plutonium issue. At the same time, there are two very important aspects of the deal. One is in terms of enforcement. There's access to international inspectors. And two, there is a snapback provision in the UN sanctions. So if Iran is found not to be in compliance with this deal, sanctions can come back on.
So there isn't, in your view, a risk of the North Korean option, whereby the regime, as in Pyongyang's case, is actually signs up to a deal sponsored by the Americans, but in fact is covertly pursuing a nuclear program, which leads to nuclear weapons?
Well, I think North Korea and Iran are not comparable. They're not comparable regimes, they're not comparable countries. Iran's supreme leader agreed to this because he is under immense domestic pressure. Iran is a much more open country. You can never say that, we're dealing with the Islamic regime, and therefore you can never say that there's no risk. But I think that there is probably enough safeguards here and enough access that the inspectors will be able to tell if Iran is not complying with this agreement.
So you talked about the domestic pressures. These largely stem, as we heard, because we were together in Tehran back in November 2013, where we spent 6 days there seeing in the Iranian leadership, including former President Rafsanjani and President Rouhani himself. And we heard firsthand the economic pressures. The country was in a terrible state, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Huge unemployment. Oil sales have gone down, have been halved. There is
currency depreciation, inflation up at near 50%.
Yeah, I mean, in the past year, I think inflation has come down quite substantially. But it is also about the fact that this regime has been unable to give any perspective, any hope to people. And Iran is a very young population. It's a population that just wants to be normal, wants to be like everybody else. It's wired, it's open to the world. And I think that this element of pressure is something that the world doesn't see very clearly. But this is what's been driving this agreement.
We got a few glimpses of that. What about the opportunities for foreign investors, the oil companies? Are they going to have the red carpet put out, or is it more going to be a carpet trade, so to speak?
Well, there's been a lot of private, some secret visits to Iran in the past few months. So there's a bit of a rush here. And the Iranians are preparing a new contracts. But I think one has to be very careful because sanctions are one issue. But there are many other issues in Iran: corruption, bureaucracy, the lack of willingness to actually lose control or give in a bit of control on the economic side. So I think lots of companies will be interested, but I think we'll see a lot more interest than we will see actual deals.
American sources have told me that the Iranians are likely to benefit up to $100 billion to $150 billion a year as a result of the progressive lifting of sanctions. Some of that money may go towards financing Hezbollah and other, shall we say, external activities pursued by the Tehran regime.
Well,
what do we do about that?
Let's be clear about one thing. This is Iranian money that is frozen. So if Iran is abiding by this deal, it gets its money back. And I think that is fair. Now, Iran has been, even under sanctions, financing and helping Hezbollah, militias in Iraq, certainly lots of help also to the Syrian regime. I think it's very important to note that tomorrow, nothing will change. Next year, probably nothing will change, and perhaps they'll be able to give them more. But I think that over time, there is a potential, and I'm careful here, there's a potential of a change of behavior.
Yeah. Finally, we need to salute, in a way, President Obama, who's pursued this deal. It's a triumph as such for diplomacy. But we also need to look at the repercussions for the region. Is there a danger that other countries like Saudi Arabia are now going to move towards a nuclear program?
Indeed, I think there is. I think the main problem in the region today is the standoff between Iran and Saudi Arabia. And I think unless that is addressed, the Middle East will continue to burn. And I think that the US now needs to have a strategy, a new policy for the region that takes this into account as the major problem and tries to help the two countries address it.
Roula Khalaf, thank you very much.